doing things. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, what was your sort of inspiration into punk music? Like,
I think I was always doing stuff a bit like that before. So I had an album out before the Vibrate, which came out subsequent, but it's stuff I was doing a few years before. So it was always a bit like that kind of slightly on fire kind of music or something.
yeah,
And I used to like Lou Reed, Velvet Underground, Iggy Pop, that sort of stuff. And I've been doing quite a lot of different little bands for years. And when the Vibrators started, I was going, oh, it's just going to be another band. But it actually, the guys in the band a couple of them worked very hard to get gigs. And off we went. I think I just like the sort of rocky end of pop music, I mean, there wasn't really any rock stuff initially, it was sort of rock and roll. And I think, when you're a kid, so I started when I was about 13, you kind of, when you do music and whatever, you kind of develop this sort of world that you're in and your friends are in, which is different to your parents, and it's quite, it's quite a nice little world, and it sort of saves you, I think, and helps you. And I think that's still true today. It's hard to know. I mean, I'm not a kid anymore, but I read a thing, some guy complaining about the police thinking everybody who was into rap music and something were in a massive gang, and this guy was going, it's not just kids. Lots of kids are, they don't really know what they're doing half the time, and then they get into music, and that sort of saves them, doesn't it?
yeah,
So I think, from that point of view, music's quite important. And so we just started the band, and there wasn't such a, there wasn't punk rock then. We just started straight away. Just go, what songs do you know, and playing that pub rock stuff, and then very fast we were learning putting our own songs that I'd written a few years before and stuff, and we were playing faster and faster and hot, and I think because people liked it, and then suddenly there's this sort of umbrella term punk rock, and there we are.
yeah,
And we were like one of the first people kind of doing it, just entirely really by accident, whatever. So because when I was doing bands before, doing that sort of similar sort of material, we would do a few gigs, and then you go, well, there didn't seem to be anywhere you could play that where people would sort of understand it and all that. So I used to just be doing stuff in sort of weird pick-up bands. They used to advertise, and you'd go along and sing a few songs with them and play the guitar the rest of the time, and the other people were singing. There were people like who worked on cruise ships, playing, and then when they weren't doing that, they were back home. They'd be in a little band in the local pubs or whatever, and they're always looking for extra people to play. If there's not got a guitar player or something. Anyway, there we are. Sorry, I'm prattling on.
no, that's it's useful. It's better than like one word once, and it'll eat up my workout. So, what I might do is I might set a recorder on this as well, just in case.
Right. Okay.
There's
Yeah.
a
Back
problem
up.
with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay, let me find this. Okay. Alright, cool. So that one's on as well now. So, with any of the songs that you played in the band, was there any political or social messages in
Not
any of them?
not really. We did have some that you could sort of say could have a political slant. Like we had Troops of Tomorrow, which a friend of mine suggested the idea to me, and when we were in Berlin, living out there for a month or so, and so I did that. But I think he was more political than I was, and it was just a general purpose sort of attitude sort of song, you know, troops of tomorrow. And I don't think it was actually aimed. I mean, it might be a very slight political song, but it wasn't actually aimed at anything political particularly. It was just sort of an idea for a song, and it was, you know, quite a strong idea, so it was reasonably successful. Had other songs that sort of, no, they weren't really. I don't think they were political. You know, I had one called, you know, Fighter Pilot, something about I'm a fighter pilot for the USSR, or something. I fly a MiG Fox baby, you know, airplanes and all that. But I'm not really particularly a political animal. At the time when punk was coming through, there was a lot of, you know, Margaret Thatcher and the 3-day week, and people made a big thing about how terrible the time was, but in fact it wasn't that bad at all. And before, when punk was sort of almost starting, we had, like, you know, the power would go off some days for an hour or two, you see, you'd have a blackout, but I mean, it was quite exciting. And all that. And like in these films, they often have this sort of background to punk was, but I don't think that it was entirely like that at all. That's their sort of slant on it, and it's gives them a really good, you know, attitude into the film or something. But you know, a lot of us, we were absolutely fine with it, and like I wasn't really working. I was doing paintings to sell or something, so I wasn't really concerned about things like the 3-day week. Didn't really, you know, all that sort of stuff. I think it was around then that wouldn't probably have affected me, you see. And you know, when you're younger, you have other things to worry about. You know, I don't think anybody, particularly in the Vibrators, was ever very political. The Clash were sort of political, but you kind of think that it was a sort of attitude that was useful to gain, you know, notoriety, press and all that, and the press liked it because it was a very good angle and they could, you know, use it. One of my friends thought punk rock was being used by the press at the time to get rid of prog rock, which is a possibility, and pub rock, but I've always thought that there were quite a lot of very good pub rock bands around that were, you know, sort of pushed out by punk being sort of coming through slightly unfairly, you know. Anyway, that's life, I suppose. I mean, I probably wouldn't particularly have liked what they were doing, but you know, if they were doing it sort of not very good, well, you know, you kind of, they ought to have been given a bit better chance. But anyway, so there was a kind of very political kind of thing there, and but I think it only lasted about a year or so, or a couple of years or something. And lots of the bands, you know, I know they're not really. I mean, UK Subs Charlie's sort of political, but it's just all about war and death and all that stuff, you see. But I don't know that it's actually aimed at preventing war or glorifying it or whatever. It's just sort of like, it's almost like when you make a film, it's like an action film set in a war thing. Often it's just the action film, and the politics is sort of like this backdrop that doesn't possibly interfere too much. Okay. So there was that. I think later on the Clash seemed to become less political. My friend, I think he used to work for them or something, but he sort of eventually he left it when he reckoned they became just another American rock band.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
But you know, I don't particularly go along with that or anything. I think like Bernie Rhodes, who was like behind, you know, did a lot of the ideology stuff and behind the Clash probably, and also you know, Joe Strummer's dad was a diplomat or worked, you know, something like that. So you got that kind of, there is that thing there, but in our band, we never consciously sort of pursued any political thing. We probably did say things about, oh yeah, you know, at the time, but I don't think we were terribly informed personally, as are most people aren't very informed, and you know, I still not very political, even though the shop here is a result of politics, really, not addressing problems at the bottom end of society enough, and various other things. So yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I remember the one that always, not necessarily of politics, but like a kind of social message, I guess, was "Keep It Clean."
Well, that was John Ellis's song, you see, and that was more about drugs, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that worked because it's sort of John's personality and the message in the song. So that was, you know, and maybe, yeah, actually that probably would lend itself to having a slight political kind of thing, you know. I think people have probably used our songs as a kind of political thing slightly, you know, and again, well, they're going, you know, like that. And I was always interested because when the Conservatives were in power, like when the upstarts, you know, Menzies going, hating, you know, those sort of people, we hate the, you know, the Conservatives, blah, blah, blah. And then when Labour got in, I was very interested to see what would happen. And then after a while, they're going, oh, they're bloody, you know, it's just the same thing, you know, and you kind of go, well, it's a solitude. And actually, I think, you know, probably was very good to have an attitude about politics, because it makes people kind of take more notice of it, even though perhaps, you know, they're not so informed and stuff. So yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Just a couple more. A lot of the narrative around punk that I heard was that you know, at the time in the 70s and stuff, in school and stuff, you were very much taught, you know your place, you know, you do your schooling and then you go straight out to the factory and stuff.
Yeah.
And that punk kind of like provided an outlet.
Yeah, I think it probably did. I mean, I think that what it is, so it wasn't till about the 50s, and you got like Teddy Boys or something, you suddenly started getting a teenage separate thing from your parents, you know, different culture and sort of gangs, as it were, you know, fashion things, you start having all different sorts. So there was that, but I went to like a grammar school and there wasn't anything really like, oh, you go to school and then you get a job. It was sort of like, you know, you go off to university and all that, and there's a sort of vague future out there, but it's not sort of, you know, it's not like the moment you're 16 you're down the factory or something.
Yeah.
And I did loads of you know, working on the Christmas Post and in factories in the summer, or doing, you know, jobs to get money, and I think it was actually quite interesting, and that's just sort of what you did. Actually, I can't remember what I was talking about. Rock and roll.
Just like you know, just when you're in your teens and.
Yeah, it's sort of. I think they have these slight. I would say there's almost like cliched views of what happens, you know, and all that. Because it's school, you know. When I was at school, you know, you'd see there would be these new bands come along, like the Beatles and all that stuff, and these people you always thought they were sort of privileged beings that were over there. Nobody we knew anybody in any bands, you see, whereas now every other person knows loads of people in bands. So they were this slightly unattainable thing, so there was never any idea, you know, in the school that you could ever have a sort of make money or have a bit of a career in music. It didn't seem to be at all on the radar, you see, and probably no real fault of the school, because they didn't sort of they didn't have a course to say about how to become a successful burglar or something either, you know what I mean? And now the idea of like going to university to learn how to play punk rock or something. He seems a bit sort of, you know, because it was sort of rebel music, you know, inverted commas in a way, all that stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I'm not sure if Ferrers ever do Rock Against Racism. Those
Yeah,
kind of
we
shows.
did. We did at least one or so of those, because I think we did one with the Ruts one time and something else, and I can't remember where it was. It might have been in Harleston or somewhere. I don't remember. I think we did one or two of those because they were sort of always around. You just sort of did them because it was like what you did, and I'm not sure if I ever read any Rock Against Racism pamphlets or anything. You know, you just assumed that's what it was, and all that. And I think, you know, they're probably very good because reggae was always put together with punk and all that, you see, and that was quite good. And but I always, sometimes you sort of think, right, well, when the punk's on, the white people are watching that, and then when the reggae or something, you know, then the black and all that. But it wasn't a kind of racist thing. It's just sort of like probably what you were interested in, you know, and all that. And I mean, very weird that some skinhead racists, you know, like really like reggae and all that, and all that, and like people at school they're with, certain black people are perfectly all right with them, you know what I mean? He's all right.
Yeah, I remember seeing
it's
This
all
Is England, I
bloody
found that kind of weird.
it's crackers, absolutely crackers. But anyway, that's the world we live in.
Yeah, it's just really bizarre. I remember I saw have you ever seen This Is England? Oh, that's
I haven't seen it, but that's supposed to be very good, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's class. Yeah, it's class. Alright, last one is so, you know, I guess the kind of narrative is that with Rock Against Racism, there was very much a kind of, you know, anti-racist attitude in punk.
Yeah,
then, but then, you know, towards say early '80s, it kind of shifts. But that's a lot to do with Oi Rock. So would you say Oi Rock was part of punk or something very distinctly different?
What is different?
Oi Rock.
Oi Rock. No, it sort of came out of it, and it's just another kind of aspect of it. It's almost like we were possibly more on the pop punk end because we had sort of, you know, and Oi was sort of like what they call it, street punk now or something like, or and I thought that was probably much more orientated as, you know, as working class driven movement or something, whereas we were more grammar school or something, you know, art school or whatever. But it was all part of the same thing in a way, and that was over on that end of it, and then, you know, so, you know, I'm sure we played loads of times with Oi bands and all that, and Gary Bushell. So yeah, and I mean, I imagine they're still out there, and it's quite catchy. Oi, oi, oi. So yeah, well, good luck to them.
Okay, mate, that's
all right. Yeah.
Questions, so cheers for that.
You can always get back to me.
Yeah. Okay.
I probably don't know what I'm talking about most